Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. With Allah's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. All praises are due to Allah. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. All praises are due to God, the Lord and cherisher and sustainer of everything, in the heavens and in the earth. I greet you with the greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, and I'm very happy to be here, and I'm really excited about this topic. When I first saw it, I said, well, they're making it real easy for me, and I said, when I come here, I'm gonna be relaxed, but I can never come before you without being overly excited, and I feel my adrenaline and my nerves rushing and everything, but this is such an exciting topic, and there's so much I can speak about it. I want to thank Imam Hameen Rasul for his excellent presentations and his words. Imam Hassan, he said something that never entered my mind. He said, because it's not the nature of a person to want to question authority. And, you know, the President of the United States says and does what he does. The country majority, well, they said the majority of people didn't vote him in, but he's our leader nonetheless. And when he said when he was saying make America great again, it hit a flat note with me also, as it did with a lot of people. But to hear our brother Hassan say, let's make the world great again, that's an excellent place to start. And by making the world great, we can make America great. And America is great, and I believe it's God's will and mercy is with America. And America also has God's protection. So our faith in America goes the furthest, the longest way, because God is with the will of the people and the majority. And as long as we continue to believe in God and have faith and believe that He's good and He accepts all good, that America will continue on this path and leadership. So I love this democracy, and I love this country and our situation here in America so much that I have complete trust in it. I know our future is going to be even better and even better example, because how far we've come socially in such a short amount of time in my lifetime, and with the great leadership that my father offered. Now, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the most I can do in telling you about him, because I wasn't present during his lifetime. I think I met him maybe 2, maybe 3 times in my lifetime as just a little boy. I was a toddler. I remember visiting his home and knowing that his home was a lot different from the home that I came from because he had a full staff there. Before, I was too young to even know what a staffed home looked like. But he had one, and as we waited, there was a formality to it. It was a home. It looked like the homes that were on both sides of the street, and but it was like a mansion, in Hyde Park. If any of y'all been in Chicago in the Hyde Park area, and I remember waiting in the foyer to be invited up to see him with my parents. I believe I walked up with my father, I'm not sure, but what I remember most is looking up from his knee. He was sitting, and so you have to know how small I was. I probably was small for my age, and I remember looking up at him and seeing his face and feeling that, oh, this is what all of the big, I don't know what type of language to use. This is what the big deal is. It's this guy here, And I remember feeling comfortable and happy. He may have smiled, he may have kissed me, and I'm not sure, but I'm 51 today, so 5 years, I might have been younger than 5, I don't know. But that's one of the only memories I had from that time. That's how impressive it was. I believe he sat me on his knee and gave me a silver dollar. And my mother held on to those silver dollars, and I have 3, either I may have somebody else's or I may have 3 of mine. That's why I believe I met him 3 times, because I was told later that he always gave silver dollars. Now, this man was so loved and so revered by the African American people, I believe, because now my father, what I have of him, all firsthand information. I knew him, I know him. I like to believe that that my heart and aspirations and personality was formed under him, and I'm happy to feel that I'm a part of him and his life, and a part of his legacy and continuing of his life. And I believe greatly, we all may not know, you might not know the history of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and his son. Much of his leadership, he was a poor man who, he met his teacher and of his religion, the one that taught him the version of Islam that he has. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he got it during the Depression 30s in Detroit. And my father also was born during the time, the 3 years that he was at the end. After he was born, after my father was born, the teacher, Farad, W.D. Farad, the one who taught Elijah and then put him as leader of his new organization. This man was poor, uneducated man from the South, unworldly, more so, you know, education, book education is not the number one education to be prosperous and successful in America, and especially during those the early 30s and during that time. Skilled labor, know-how, you know, what community you brought up in. We're more, that's one thing that kind of scares me about today. We're less community orientated, that people by nature are social creatures, and we develop our personalities and our talents in a community. And during this age of high technology, where we're less speaking to human beings, more or less than watching a plastic or glass screen, and getting an education that, you know, by all means, we could never have gotten at any time in the history of humanity. So you can be the most intelligent human being that your potential can allow you to be today. But back then, community was one of the most important things. So I believe that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, growing up, knowing his identity clearly as an African American, and coming up from slavery, that African Americans were becoming aware of who they were as a people and who we are as a people, and being impoverished in coming from Christian life, Christian African American, and seeing the kind of a hypocrisy of, you know, the love and the respect and the dignity and the purity of faith that Christianity represented in America and in the world, and then for African Americans to see themselves in their condition in their life and how they were treated by who we reverend as being the family of the leaders in Christianity and the white race, and seeing the injustice in the world. I'm pretty sure Honorable Elijah Muhammad saw all sorts of cruelties and injustice. And one thing that stands out in my mind, that he actually was walking home from school or walking through his neighborhood and saw a friend of his hanging from a tree. And that deeply impressed him and made him want to leave the South. So one of the reasons, that's one of the reasons, I know the major reason, that he had met my grandmother, Clara, and she had, her father was also a preacher. I believe he was Baptist, like the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's father was a preacher. Now, I don't know what his position was on them running off to Detroit and eloping, but I don't think Clara's father was happy about it. So they eloped, and I thank him for making that decision. But Clara, she had a strong role in, like most of our women. And I kind of want to jump forward to, we was asked a question earlier about what we're known for. We're known for Honorable Elijah Muhammad's love for his people. He led his people like a father would lead a family that he's responsible for shoes, roof over the home, head and shoes, clothing, food. He took care of us in that manner. And I believe that his sincerity and his love and his purity of his love and his purity of his love for God and his honesty and his strong commitment and faith to want to serve God. See, this poor and educated African-American man who had not seen the world was given a satire, a picture of what, like a fairy tale, a picture of what the world was, which wasn't true, but it sounded so good at that time to Honorable Elijah Muhammad. It couldn't have been anything other than God coming to rescue him from that miserable, depressing condition that Farad found him and all the people he knew that were like him. All black people was in that horrible condition that he found himself in, where he was ashamed. A man develops himself and becomes himself after marriage. Muslims, this is what we believe, that your life as a man and as a believer in God starts at marriage. It's actually a hadith that says, a quote that says that the religion is at the shore. Marriage is at the shore of the religion. So that's half, the shore represents half of your obligations to God. And long story short, I got a son. I saw he came home from college and he was different. I said, doggone, I saw my sister come home from college and she was different. I said, who is this person in our living room? She sounded different, she looked different. And so, but she went on, married, happy. But my son, I was a little worried because he was looking at me different. So I said, how can I help my son? What can I do? I thought I did everything right. So I saw he was interested in a young lady. So I encouraged them to come to our home where my wife and I could be in there present and be with him. And thanks to Allah, I was able to appeal to his nature as a human being. There's no greater force in the life of a human being than the life force. The life force to want to reproduce and to want to partner or marry, to find your mate. You put too much rational into it. A lot of people want to rationalize things and think what life made, I'm looking for. No. Your nature is going to compel you to find someone that you're going to love, and that's going to be your partner. Now, whether you honor that or not, and you stay with that person, that's up to you. And like Imam Rasul said, that we have that freedom to go against our nature, but God put that in our very nature. And so I believe that marriage and the encouragement for African Americans, because why do we have this problem? A lot of people don't look at it this way. I met a woman at a gas station the other day, and she said, I explained what I'm about to tell you. She said, I never looked at it that way. I never heard that. And she said she was 73. So I said, and she worked for a career, 30 years in the government. So I didn't ask her where, but she said, and she was really happy to talk to me. So I said, 400 years, being denied the very essence of what it means to be a human being. To be able to father children, marry, father children, and raise and protect and create a life of relative comfort is your goal, but to create a life that is satisfying to you before your Lord for your family. A man is a leader by nature. That's why a lot of people wonder, say, how come, what is Imam, your reverend? Or what are you, are you a priest or a reverend? Or, no, just Imam. They say, why do you say just Imam? Because, Imam is a right that is given by God to men. And the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, the best title for me is brother. So when it comes to titles, we play down titles. So Imam is a title. And we often find ourselves playing it down because Islam is a true democracy. And the male any male, because of his physiology, God created him to be a leader. And because of a woman's physiology, he created her to be more dependent on the male, because there's a period of time, if any woman has ever had a child or seen a woman who's had a child, that she has to pay very, very close attention to that child for the development of his, not just his physical life, but his spiritual, social life, everything that child, after it leaves the physical womb of the mother, is in the womb of the mother. So the type of person that child turns out to be actually develops under the care of the close, loving, whether it's going to be a cruel, mean monster. It's not all on the mother, it's on the environment. But the mother is the first protector and the first educator. That's why I like when Brother Hassan said, Imam said that man means mind. Well, I was sitting in Clara Muhammad School, and that was part of our curriculum. They gave us a book. What do you call books in school? It was somebody probably said it. It was one of our texts. It was our textbook with a outline image of my father pointing to the mind. That one of the early speeches he gave, he said, man means mind and woman means womb of mind. There's probably more to it than that. Man means mind and woman means womb of mind. That's it? Okay. Yeah, so, I guess I will put that. I said, I don't want the sisters to feel that I'm putting the weight of the world on them, saying that the world can be saved by her and that burden is on her. But it's a fact, it's true. But it's the man's responsibility to ensure that woman has the right conditions and the right environment to raise that child in. So it's our responsibility to bring peace. Never did a civilization develop until they could feel relative peace in their life. And that's what our religion is, summed up in a nutshell. Our religion, Islam, is about getting to that state of peace in our soul, peace with our Lord, ourselves, and with our fellow man, so that the true potential of our original nature can be preserved and kept and nurtured and can grow. There was never a civilization that during the time of war, this is so many examples, that they actually made progress. It wasn't until China built that big wall. It wasn't until Prophet Muhammad made peace with all the warring tribes. It wasn't until America came and established peace in the land of America that they were able to build and then accelerate in material wealth and development, education. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had, in his lifetime, his message had reached the entire known world, right? The entire known world had been reached with the message of Islam, and peace was established. And because of that, the first public education in the history of mankind was established. How many people knew that? Most people didn't know that, right? There was no public education, meaning general public, like you didn't have to pay for this knowledge. You had to go out and either be raised up in this knowledge, you had to be blessed to be a part of the ruling order in order to have true education. So even the terms, is it university? I think university is an Islamic term. There's so many things that we know that the Renaissance time came out after the light of the Quran. Back to the Elijah Muhammad, it was easy for him, being human and the nature of the human innocence that we all have inside of us, to want to save his people. And I believe that although what he taught was further from Islam than any of the other major faiths, and further from Islam as it's revealed in the Quran than most any religions, period, even the ones that we might think are kind of ludicrous, that how can you condemn another people, that is the reason why he taught what he taught. but he described it as being a preparation for people who had been reduced lower than level of the animal. And then there's a psychology. You know, if you're produced outside of your nature for the purpose of profit, I even heard, I think Imam Mohammed said that, you know, that the Caucasian race didn't hate African Americans. That slavery, you have some hateful people, but a person with a mental illness, you can show him a butterfly, he might hate the butterfly. You tell him the butterfly is the enemy, he would go after it and try to destroy it. So it's a spiritual, a sickness of the spirit and the soul, hatred. But the slavery, the purpose of slavery was to build the new world. It was for, now, a God-fearing person wouldn't accept this responsibility. And you can study theology, go study religion. I don't have time to explain all that time it would take to explain how can you rationalize, or how did a people claiming to be a people of faith rationalize slavery. They believe that the end was was justified. The means were justified by the end, and the end was to build this new world. But when you look at it, it looks so horrible from a human standpoint, and that's why eventually the world condemned it. That God, the human soul belongs to God. The Bible teaches of a place, an invulnerable place, a sacred place in the Garden of Eden that was inviolable, that no one could plow this field except God. And that field that was, I'm not thinking of the right word, that you couldn't be touched by anyone but God, was and is, it represents the human soul. So the logic that my father followed, that religion is all based on logic. God created us as an intellect, and things in the world and the universe, everything makes sense. And I'm going to come back to that. That property, the logic my father came up with, that said that, well, if this is invulnerable property that belongs to God, and if it was violated through the account of slavery, that they attempted to steal God's property, the human soul, and make it into something that God didn't intend it to be, then wouldn't justice be for that God to come to the rescue of that sacred property and to redeem them? And so for African American people that have been reduced lower than an animal, less than an animal, that God is the one that raised up one amongst us as an example to the whole world. And not to say that we are any different in our physical makeup, in our spiritual makeup, our social makeup, anything in our nature than any other human being in America. But Barack Obama becoming president of the same country, you say, well, he wasn't African American. If you were black, if you were a little bit brown, this is what a lot of people that don't understand racism, that racism is not whether you're African American. Racism was a condemnation of people of color, and that touched all four corners of the earth, and that all people of color were condemned as inferior stock. And so for him, he is a symbol of God's power, that the sacred property of the human soul belongs to God and to God alone. And you say, well, he was a political leader. He was a political leader. Wasn't it the political leaders that enslaved us and condemned us? So it's a sign and a symbol. He is also a sign and a symbol of him and the potential for African American people. But the same forces exist in society to beat down the self-esteem and to crush the spirit and to try to retard that nature to work together as a group and to be a group. That was 400 years of not knowing. Most of us, the children, were were birthed, pretty much like, people, I don't understand, I guess to the time I come up in, but my parents, my earlier age, they used to say, don't talk about these kind of things to children. They can't understand it, they can't handle it. But it's a fact. I believe the truth liberates and the truth makes things clear. And when you see God's justice and his majesty and his power, it doesn't sting and it doesn't make you hateful and violent. If hate and violence is in your nature, if you don't want hate and violence in your nature of your child, don't teach him it in the house. Don't teach him hatred. Don't teach him violence in the home. And try to monitor the influences. Be like that mother, that womb, and nurture him and keep him away from things that may affect his nature. So I don't think it's bad to let a child know that we were bred like farm animals. Teach them, take them to the farm first, maybe. Teach them, say, well, they want this farm. It's kind of like even plants. You want this plant to, the next crop to look like this first crop, you better use those seeds. So they would take the one male stud animal and mate that stud with the females. And then they would produce that gene, reproduce that gene pool or whatever. And they did the same thing with us. Many of us were eunuchs. They castrated the male so that they couldn't mate, and it made it easier for them to manage because you don't have them going through a lot of, what they say, not a lot, it's a big discouragement from a lot of the aggression that you get. So it was easy to manage. But it was because of the rationale. This wasn't a diabolic mind. This was a mind that was developed and given the rules of how you raise a slave, a crop of slaves, a group of slaves, or what have you. And so the mothers were pregnated, and the children, and the mothers were sent to birth the children to a different place. I heard someone use the term middle passage was the terminology, and they would raise these children till they're old enough to be sold, and then they would distribute the children. So the life that other people have, Asians, Latinos, a lot of Europeans, they can look at their history and go back hundreds of years, thousands of years, maybe even tens of thousands of years, and they feel just as connected to that culture or that history as maybe even the early ancestors did, because they identify with that ancestry. But African American people, we've been told all this time, don't look at your beginning, don't look at your nature, there's no need to identify. You're a human being, you're in the greatest country in the world, you're an American, you have the freedom to do the same, so you should be equal as any other American. You see? So we've been told that, but we just don't feel it. But what Imam Mohammed gave us with the concept, I heard somebody mention New Africa. We know how to build it. The way we build New Africa is to remind your brother and your sister that we are a new people in the family of man. Let's say man is millions of years old, but the African American people, we are the true Native Americans. We don't have a beginning before the plantations here in America and around the world. We are truly a new people. And the way that you know a people is that they strongly identify with something emotional in their past that hold them together. Just ask any people, ask Latinos, what is it in your history that you know about your people, how your people became a people? Ask the Irish, ask the French, ask any of the Asian people. I guarantee you they're gonna give you some story. Ask the Jew. They're going to give you some great story of a great will or a great strength or tenacity to survive and to work together as a people and to struggle up from a lower condition to a more dignified position in their own personal lives and in their society. This is what we experienced coming up from slavery, that we all experienced. We had ancestors that could sit and tell you what the whip. We might have had some, just 3 generations. Maybe not your great-grandma, but your great-great-grandma can tell you about this plantation. And your great-grandma probably can tell you about sharecropping. And tell you about, and your uncle can probably tell you about police brutality.